Hey guys, and welcome back to the Live Good Enough podcast. I'm Ross, this is Joe, and we're back again this week. We're going to be running through all the articles we've been running on livegoodenough.com this week. If you're new to Live Good Enough, what we talk about here is everything that's to do with living successfully with balance. And when we talk about success, it isn't something that's prescribed. It's something, whatever that means to you, whatever success means to you. And the with balance bit is important at the end, because we believe that to live a successfully balanced life, it includes just that, to live with balance. But Joe, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Ross. I'm living with balance. It's funny. I'm in a studio space in Norwich where we put on an exhibition. We've helped an
Oh,
artist put on an
fantastic.
exhibition for his debut collection. So it's a well space that we've created. So it's kind of very much trying to bring that to life. Actually, the feeling of a space that can bring some balance to people's lives where it may be chaos elsewhere. And certainly know that that's where sort of the week has been outside of the space. Has been pretty chaotic. But
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. So is this a space that you'll be working at yourself or with others or?
it's actually only as a pop up. So it's been
Mm.
on for ends on Sunday, and it's called Here Comes the Sun. Um, it's the WR commissioned by an artist called Sam Harrins, who is Norwich based. And so really at the Fairhurst Gallery. So interesting space in Norwich.
Yeah, perfect. So we're gonna get right in on this week's articles. And if you haven't been here before, what we do, and we put out 5 articles every weekday, and which you can catch over at livegoodenough.com. And what we do on a Friday is we take the top 3 performing ones, the ones that have resonated more than others with you guys, and we run through them and give some conversation around them. So the first one we're going to talk about today, Joe, is the one we published on Monday, which was around recharging your social battery and kind of navigating social overload. Now, this is something that I personally could relate to.
Mm.
I kind of self-diagnose myself as a extroverted introvert in that way, that whereby there's elements where I can really thrive throughout the week in kind of what might be deemed to be an extroverted personality type. But there are times when I need to recoup that energy, and usually that comes with then spending time by myself or with myself, to kind of recoup that. I don't know, where do you feel you kind of sit in that kind of spectrum of things?
Yeah, it's funny because I think if I was to describe myself, I'd say I'm an extrovert, and I actually get energy from those social
Mm,
interactions. But I think
mm,
actually the older or more, maybe even more aware I'm getting is that actually it's different type of interactions do different things,
mm,
and obviously the expectation perhaps of um, what you're doing in those spaces, what those are actually change your relationship to them. So I think a lot of it probably for me stems around level of expectation that is being put probably more so on by myself to any environment I'm going into that is a social one.
mm.
And if there isn't a level of performance that's needed or anything else, then that adds these sort of layers, even if they're made up. And they're not ones that are it's not that it is anything to do with work or it is something else, but I feel like there might be a performative element or something that's in there versus going around a friend's house and seeing some mates. And actually, for me, even the distinction between social is it's not really about the social. I think I do thrive on social interaction, but that is has to be without expectation. And when there's
Mm.
an element of expectation that is around it, even if that's from myself, not from anyone else, which is probably most of the time, then that's when I can find them being quite draining.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's interesting looking at the article, actually, kind of the stats around some of this stuff. So the Mental Health Foundation in the UK, around 74% of adults have felt overwhelmed or able to cope with social pressures at some point in their lives. And I think this is something that, regardless of where you feel you are on that spectrum and your personality type, I think there's times when we all can feel, quite overwhelmed. And it may not be the actual social environment, but it might just be other things that maybe we are navigating at that time. And then the social environment is the time when we really feel that we need to have some downtime. And it's interesting, and exactly what the article says. There are people like myself and yourself which appear to be at the, either ends of those sides of the spectrum. Um, but yeah, and the article goes on around some of the things that you could kind of look into if you feel like that you need some space away. Things that can help. You know,
Mm,
for example, setting boundaries. I think to speak to that initially, that's quite a powerful tool to have, and in all areas of our lives, I think, in regards to be able to set boundaries. But you know, maybe if that invitation for something that you're down to go to, whether it's a work event or maybe a social event, and maybe you're just at the point where you don't feel that you're in the right place to give as much of yourself in that situation. We can
mm,
turn things down. I think sometimes we feel that colleagues or friends will not understand, but I think that conversation is a little bit different now. Would you say?
yeah, I have to say, I think I struggle with that. I really struggle with 100% with saying no, particularly around social occasions when I feel I might be letting someone down.
Yeah.
And so I think for years I've sort of pushed myself through that. And I think I'm still doing. I have to say I'm still doing that now quite a lot. But I think noticing it is important. And I think I absolutely recognise the importance of boundaries and how they're in place. I think there was unfortunately for me a difference between saying it and doing it. Even if I look at my own reality right now, and actually what are
Mm.
the things I should, and I think even just saying it out loud and just talking about saying no to that event or that thing,
Yeah.
as you said, can be very empowering.
Mm.
But it still doesn't mean it's an easy thing to do. And often it can be the harder thing to do is to say no, rather than just say yes, which actually a lot of the time is we can keep on doing this. And so, yeah, I think because of probably a working situation at the moment that I'm finding that challenging. That a lot of my work is actually around socialising and interaction, um,
Mm.
and so it means that is more draining, probably as a result in lots of ways. Because
Mm.
you're right, we have a choice. We always have a choice, and a lot of the time it doesn't feel like that. Even if we know that that's the case. And I think actually just even you saying it just now, Ross, made me think again, reflect on sort of some of the things I've even been to this week, and thought like, did I really need to go to that,
Mm.
or was that something that would I have benefited? And I know it's perhaps slightly off tangent, but what you were saying about in terms of how you can recoup or what you can do with that. Actually, I found I really like being on the train, for example. It's
Mm.
quite a
Yeah.
restorative environment for me, particularly if I've got headphones on or can listen to music. But equally, this week I've been driving somewhere, up and down, a commute, and actually that space, even for an hour either side of the day, again has felt actually really restorative. Um,
Mm.
yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I think sometimes kind of the thought of what we think is going to play out is obviously it's often a lot worse than what the actual end result is. And I think
Mm,
from my own experience, if you just can kind of just gently just lean into saying no to a very small thing sometimes, and then kind of building yourself up that way, and what I found also is that sometimes when you have those conversations with someone and you say, look, I'm not feeling in the right frame of mind, can we split? There's a gasp on the other end of the phone line that says, "Oh, I'm glad you said that. I've been feeling
mm,
this," and it almost we're waiting for someone else to kind of make that step sometimes, to give us permission in a way to do that. And
mm.
so I think my message on that would be, you know, this can feel quite insular when you feel like that, but I think you'd be surprised to hear and to know that there are many other people that probably feel the same in a lot of those circumstances.
Yeah, completely agree. I think the last thing I'll just probably go back to is about that level of expectation. And actually, I was just thinking about it in my head about like all of the time, even if I do feel, because this whole thing about are you recharged through socializing or are you not? And I would say I am when I can relinquish the level of expectation. And that only comes from within me. It's not something that comes from someone else. It comes from
Mm,
me just being like, okay, actually, just doesn't matter what anyone thinks about you, or it doesn't matter what you do in this environment. Just be yourself
mm.
and enjoy it. And then often, if I've got to that level, then I'm fine. But even getting to that actually makes me realise that I do struggle sometimes, even just
Yeah,
push myself through it.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that the article speaks about, which I think is I find quite helpful as well, is like anything, if it's in the diary, it gets done,
Mm,
and if you can schedule time
mm,
when you can have time for yourself, and it's in the diary, and maybe it's a reoccurring entry or something like that. I think that kind of alleviates some of the things from going acutely wrong at other points. If you've got regular time to do whatever that means, go for a walk, walk the dog, read a book, have a bath, whatever, whatever you things are those kind of like those
mm,
times of self-love throughout the week. I
mm.
think I think that can alleviate it as well. Is that something that you do, or do you just kind of pick out time as and when you get it?
No, I think recognizing more and more that, as you say, in the diary gets done, or for me, it's if it's a routine, it gets done. If it's something that I can
Yeah.
continuously, you know, repeat to the point that it becomes something that I acknowledge as a habit, then actually
Mm,
that's locked in. So, for me, taking like 2 minutes in the garden first thing I wake
mm,
up, and I'm very fortunate to have an outside space which I can go into, but that actually really
yeah.
helps me set the rest of the day, for example. Um,
Mm,
it's yeah, no, definitely building it in to everyday life, and breathing is actually an important thing to really on. Going to a going to a certain type of yeah. Um, if I ever feel overwhelmed.
yeah, definitely, definitely. So, guys, if that some of that resonated with you and you feel like you want to dive deeper into that conversation, check out the website. You'll find the link to that article in the show notes. But we're now going to move on to the second most popular this week, which was around parenting and good enough parenting. Something that isn't always talked about, but is getting more and more traction. And this conversation or this article, Joe, was prompted by an experience you had this week from listening to Woman's Hour, I think.
Mm, yeah, no, exactly that. And also reflect on my own parenting and the parenting that I've had. So yeah, it was really interesting actually listening to sort of the experience of someone talking about parenting and what that also what how we can be more kind to ourselves and to and also but put in place the right kind of boundaries that we need as parents to also reflect on what our parenting journey was like from from a generation perspective too.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think as the article says, we're inundated with lots of views or social media articles or highlight reel versions of parenting through the accounts that we follow. And I think, as someone who's kind of 13 years into parenting myself, there's almost that feeling continually of, am I doing the right thing? Am I giving my child what he or she needs? Am I doing a good job? And we have to remember that as and when if we're lucky enough to have a child, the first day that it's handed over to us, we just we just go with it, and there's no kind of right or wrong in that. And but the interesting thing is, I think, is that both the article speaks about this idea of good enough parenting, where it suggests that instead of trying to be the best parent, to instead the importance of being present and emotionally available,
Mm,
rather than perfect. I think is speaks volumes. I think.
yeah, I think yeah, and I think that it's a really thorny subject. I think in lots of ways, though, I think we have to recognise that actually a lot of parents um, can sound quite glib by just saying being present and actually parents will go, well, I can't be present because I have, a lot of people might be thinking, I can't be present,
Oh
I've got
yeah,
to work, I've got to provide, I've
yeah,
got to do this and this and that, it's a luxury. And I sort of want to rub up against that a little bit. And not to say that I think that's wrong, but to say I think there's a lot of stuff that we're still perhaps not acknowledging as choices, even if they're really
mm,
difficult choices around the quality of life that we might be able to have in terms of the things we might be able to buy, in terms of the holidays we might be able to go on, but actually learning more about the need for just love. ultimately, um, I think a lot of it was about how, how loved does your child feel? Like, how do they actually feel as if, um, there is, attention there? And it drove me to the next morning, just, making the time for my son who, got up at like 6 and, wanted to do like draw some art and actually just again
Mm.
stop, think about what really he needed in those moments, or in that moment,
Mm.
which was just me. All he needed was my attention to help him do that. And I think that, a lot of the time we can get, or I personally, I can get, swept away with, whatever might feel important in my world, whether that particularly be work or something else, and lose sight of actually the most important thing, which is my kids and my wife, but my kids more than anything, and the availability that they need.
No, definitely. I think, and you made a really good point there in that, the way in which we share these articles in conversation is by no means prescriptive in the ways that we think we should be. They are to bring conversations which may be new, or ideas which may be new, or maybe ones that you've had forever. Our aim is to meet people wherever they are in the
Mm,
journey that they're on. But I know from my own perspective that, just by putting this article together, similar to you, I think, from that experience when you're on listen to the radio on the same subject, is, they can act as little prompts sometimes, and you can reflect on those prompts and say, well, let's look at let's look back at the last couple of days, and yeah, maybe I did do that. Maybe I was too concerned with my own ego or my own,
mm,
my own things, and it was a bit of a projection, or those sort of things. And I think especially, I don't think we mentioned it in the article, but just one of those things whereby I think, especially in the summer holidays and things like that, I think we're in a cycle now in today's society where we think we need to do stuff all the time. That we need to go out and do this and do that and spend money and all that kind of stuff. But in fact, similar to what you were saying about the drawing, I think just kind of sitting and spending time, or whether that's a conversation or just a simple drawing or something like that, I think we can sometimes forget that presence when we can get it, because lives are busy.
mm.
We're many of us are working or have other commitments or are caring for other people. But I think, we don't have to necessarily go to stuff to do, but maybe just spending time with others.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Ross. I think, I also don't think it, unfortunately, not what I thought about it, I don't think it gets easier, with time,
No.
or anything else. I don't think there is. I don't think there is like a silver bullet. I know with a lot, again, with all this stuff we're talking about, you're constantly working at it. It's not like one
Mm.
day you're just going to wake up and it's all going to be you're just going to do it well all the time.
Yeah.
We all have our own, kind of in a way the sort of the two subjects we've been talking about today and almost link as well, because our social battery, how we might feel, impacts a lot of
Yeah.
how we are in
Hmm.
other environments, can link to what we are like as parents for that time that we have, and I know personally me, I definitely can be a different person at home than that and the person that I don't particularly like sometimes, in terms of my own, because I've let everything go. I've there is no mask on, there is no
Mm.
feeling I have to be a certain way, and so
Mm.
I might be slightly less patient or short-tempered with the people I want to be the most patient with, and that's the irony. And
Mm.
so I think actually it's trying for me, very personally trying to flip that and like work out, okay, well, how can I make sure that my battery is charged in the right place to give me that space at the same time as we've said, like good enough parenting just means accepting that there might be some things you cannot be perfect all the time, at all, and that, that's okay, and that you will
Mm.
make mistakes because we all make mistakes. That's okay too, and owning them, I think as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we almost need a kind of a social media platform where we just post all the stuff that regularly just goes wrong, goes awry, and goes, it's not necessarily a highlight, but maybe it is a highlight in a different way.
Yeah,
Um,
I suppose, yeah, sorry, and not sorry to jump in, Ross. I was just going to ask you, or just because I do find there's, I suppose there's two things on that. One, isn't there, like on social media particularly, it's, a whole generation of Instagram or any other platform not really being a mirror, but being a mirror to the things we want to put on display. And so therefore you wouldn't. But then equally, feels to me this sort of like movement of actually a bit of a competition about the vulnerability or about the things that are a mess. So actually, then you're like, well, my life isn't as bad as this thing is suggesting. So is that worse that I'm not in this place? Did I do? And actually, again, it's just for me the sort of maybe caring a bit less about that. Maybe if we can, and just wherever we are is where we are.
Yeah, I think certainly one of the things that I felt has helped me over the past however long has been just being intentional with social
Mm,
media use. So, if we're doing things like this, or we're doing things like work,
mm,
or we're doing things like, where there's a prescriptive need for me to go into that and do a job or take
mm,
an action, I can do that and I can get away. It's the time when it's kind of like there's no real intention and it's just open and it becomes a time suck sort of element. And then, you almost kind of consume it by way of just sitting with it. Yeah, certainly intention, like many other things, seems to work for
mm.
me.
Yeah, but I completely agree. Thank you for sharing, Ross. Cool.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on. So again, if you want to dive more into that conversation about the concept of good enough parent, you can jump in on the article in the show notes and it will take you through. But lastly, we're going to talk about something that I don't think maybe talk about too much, and it's around annual leave. And I guess this is when we talk about annual leave, it's generally for people who are employed in some way. But the conversation carries over as well to maybe those of us who are self-employed, and maybe choose to set aside time throughout the year. It's a bit of a different process, but the same kind of thought. And the article just kind of speaks to the fact that it's more than just a perk. Annual leave is more than just a perk that you get through your workplace or through your business setup. Because some of the stats that we had in the article, that people just don't necessarily take off their full entitlement. Some people are not taken off the full the full amount or even some amount from their annual
Mm,
leave. And when you think about what that concept of holiday of annual leave is for, um, that's a little worrying, I think, when it comes to well-being, because are we getting those periods of downtime throughout a whole year period of the work that we do?
mm.
What are your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I think it's a. I think it, as you rightly said right at the beginning, it really depends on where you are in the employment spectrum,
Mm,
as to how you relate to this topic. If you're fully employed, then you probably do have a statutory amount of holiday that you're supposed to take, that is guaranteed, that's paid for,
mm,
and there are challenges around that. And even the policy that your company has, obviously the number of days they have, versus the what's the culture like within the organisation. And often the culture of an organisation very much sets the tone and particularly leadership around the expectations of holiday,
yeah.
and what that looks like. Then you go into, as you said, with the self-employed area or freelance, and that can look very different because again, those individuals, myself, now I don't get and holiday paid. It's something that which is unfortunately it should be seen as an investment in well-being more than anything, but can be seen as a cost to a business because
Mm,
it's going to take out directly the revenue that is going to potentially be there. And I think that therein lies a bit of a problem or a challenge, which is about the sort of relationship between money and well-being, which is where it probably comes into. And actually, almost for me, I definitely have had times in my career where I didn't take enough holiday, as in when I was employed, and that was because I didn't physically think I could take the time off with the amount of work and the projects that were going on. In the early stages of my career, that absolutely happened. I kept on having years where I'd roll over, at least 2 weeks of holiday, and I'd I'd be really frustrated that I hadn't taken it. And I'd be really, and I'd be burnt out. So for me, I think that the subject that we go to being good enough, I think, and this idea of more balance, holiday is absolutely critical. Annual leave and breaks, or maybe we just call it breaks from work. Forget holiday or annual leave, like a period of break from the sustained pressure of a working environment is healthy for everyone, irrespective of
Mm.
whatever your employment status or type is. But it will look different to you. And the other thing that's interesting is to work out what that actually looks like, because there's loads of ways you can take holiday. You can decide that you take long weekends, a Friday and a Monday off alongside, and then you go on weekend breaks, and actually you find that's really intense because you're not taking any, you're traveling a lot, it's really intense when you're there versus, going, actually, I'm going to take 2 weeks break at a certain point, and then it's, laptop down, phones off for that 2 week period. And I think there's a load of stuff that sits around holiday, which, um, is also can be quite triggering for people, around finding it more stressful to take holiday because of the amount of work that's needed to be done before you go on holiday and what might be there when you get back. And
Yeah.
and so again, there's a whole different dimension to the sort of annual leave question. But fundamentally, we all need breaks. so working out how you navigate that yourself is probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think, like you say, I think the conversation around annual leave is just a vehicle for the wider thing
Mm,
of, like you say, just taking breaks. And I think something we didn't actually touch upon in the article was, you know, for those of us who care for someone else, be it family members or children or a partner, often in a lot of scenarios that period of annual leave, if you're employed, is taken during school holidays to look after your
mm,
children. Could be to have other time to care for a loved one if you're a carer for that person. So sometimes it is taken up, but it's taken
mm,
up not necessarily for your own benefit. So I think that wider conversation, like we say there, is important. And I think what we're not saying is that you need to go and book all your holiday. What we're saying is, I think with a lot of things that we speak about at Live Good Enough, is that maybe try for 10%, 10% more. You know, I sometimes if we look at the holiday that we booked up and maybe we haven't booked any up or we haven't given ourselves much time, maybe 10%, because 10% I think is just a small step, and maybe that means just an afternoon or a couple of hours or something really small, some small steps that we can take. And you make a really good point there in regards to, you can see that some people, if they haven't got what they deem as a holiday booked, either when they're going away with a family or on their own, they think, oh, I haven't got anything booked, I just won't bother. But, you
mm,
know, we need to find other things that we can use that time for, to have that thing. And the article speaks of staycations. If you're not going far further afield, is there somewhere you could go locally,
mm,
using that for your own wellness days, just having days where you just choose things that are important to you or you love to do, um learn something new. Is there ways that we can find comfort and relaxation in learning something new? A lot of us, contribute,
mm,
attribute, should I say, learning new things as a relaxing thing to do. So is there something you can do, a new language or painting or cooking something, and we've spoken about it before, but volunteering was on there as well. Obviously that is a way of helping others where it's not necessarily yourself. But again, if your own personality finds relaxation or feeling good around certain tasks, maybe kind of inviting those in as well.
mm.
But I think we both agree, regardless, that whether it's talking about annual leave or it's talking about something else, it's just about taking time out. And like you said before, there's a thread, I think, that runs through all the elements of conversation here, is around kind of taking time out. And maybe that just that extra 10% is something that we can work to.
I think you're right. I think the extra 10% is a really nice idea. I think there's another thing I'd just add would be about there's taking it, and then there's paying attention to the quality of time that we take.
Yeah.
And actually going, like, even I can share an example of like taking holiday, but still taking my laptop for work.
Oh
And
goodness, yeah,
then
yeah.
that again, and I know automatically, and my wife is like, well, that means that then there's work here, or you're bringing work
Mm,
with you,
mm,
and it might be, but then I also know, having had therapy and stuff around it, like actually it can be really helpful to manage, say it's an hour every day, that's all it is, but it again goes back to boundaries.
mm,
But I also can recognise that your quality of your break is dependent upon the amount of time that's actually away from it and out of your brain versus just by saying you're at the office. And they might seem like, someone could be like, oh yeah, that went away, but you're like, did you actually step away from it or not? And I think I really liked what you brought in around education, or it was even learning something new, because that
mm.
can be redefining what holiday looks like in for ourselves, which I think is again back to that, like, a holiday is really a holiday for me, a holiday from the pressure of something I'm not enjoying, or feeling and nourishing another part of me.
Yeah, I think there's opportunity just to be really creative around some of this stuff, and to maybe leave behind what we thought before as times when we can only take time out. Whether it's a physical holiday, whether it's things that are in the diary. There's no
Mm,
reason why we can't take that blank diary and create something with
mm,
from the point of wanting to have downtime. I think again it goes back to that what gets diaried gets done. I think
mm,
that's a good thing. If it's down, we kind of we it's like journaling, I guess. You write it down, and you're kind of more compelled to then either take action or to reflect on it, which I think works great. But yeah, if there's something you want to jump into around this conversation again on taking time out, and especially around the vehicle of kind of annual leave, jump into the livegoodenough.com. We'll put the link below, and you can get into that. But that's our three topics for this week. Again, we want this to be a conversation, a two-way conversation. And so if there's anything that resonated for you from the conversation today, or indeed the articles, you can drop a comment under the articles. You can, if you're on Spotify, you can leave us a voicemail on there. On YouTube, leave us a comment, or send us a DM. We'd love to hear your thoughts around some of this. And just to remember that, through all these conversations, part of the goal is to not be prescriptive, but just to invite you into conversations or ideas that maybe you haven't had time to look at. And if we can just help by kind of giving you a nudge every now and then, saying, look, what about this? We hope that's going to give you some help as we do that. But Joe, have a great week, mate. And
you too.
we'll catch you all next week. Take care.
Take care.